Hey John, what's up?
Scotty, what you doing this weekend, buddy?
I don't know. I might take to the fields for some LARPing or make a sculpture of Vin Diesel out of ham. It's kind of 50-50 at this point.
Nah, screw that, man. Let's do something epic, you know? Something that our grandchildren would never think a mere mortal could have done.
So what are we doing exactly? I don't really want to go to jail again.
One weekend, 2,000 points. Let's each paint an army.
Let's do it.
Let's do it!
Let's do it!
Do it! Hello, friends. I've got a confession to make today. I've had a steady diet of lies and excuses that I've been feeding myself as to why I've not painted my Warhammer armies. I've made those excuses, procrastinated, put up unnecessary barriers, and even gone so far as to hide those gray models in the closet to not remind myself of the shame on a daily basis. But no more. Today, I draw a line in the sand. It is me versus that army of gray. One weekend, Friday night through Sunday night, to determine, can I paint an army? Now, I'm not going into this challenge unprepared. I've never actually painted a full Warhammer army before, so I feel like I need to set myself up for success if I have any chance to actually pull this off. So I've come up with my patented 3 steps to slay the gray. Step 1, I got approval from my wife. You see, if I'm going to be down in the basement painting nonstop for an entire weekend, the number one thing that will crush my chance at success is an unhappy spouse. Ensure that they're okay with this, or may God have mercy on your soul. Step 2, all my models are already built, primed, and based coming into this weekend. I can do those in the evenings, an hour here, an hour there, and quite frankly, most of us have probably been playing with the gray models already, so they're probably already built. We need to only be focusing on paint on model for this weekend. And finally, step 3, I made a full test model prior to engaging in this full army in a weekend. I need to ensure that every step along the way I'm doing with confidence, and that test model will confirm to me that I've been doing something right. If I'm happy with the test model, all I do is I write down each step one after the other and follow that. It's not about thinking this weekend, it's about doing, and we need to get this thing done. Our very first step is to get the main color of the model down. For me, it's going to be all the bones. For you, it could be an entirely different color. But we want to utilize our airbrush to get that main color down first. So I'm going to go through and airbrush the bones. I don't care about hitting other areas, but I'm also not going to try to waste much time in just spraying the whole model. Those are seconds that will add up over these 71 models. Hit the bones, don't miss anything, but then let's move on. Now, I don't use the airbrush an exorbitant amount over the course of this project, but I do use it a handful of times. For steps like this, you can certainly use a big brush and apply this base tone manually. You don't need an airbrush, but note it will save you a lot of time by having this airbrush. With the airbrushing complete, I'm going to start moving over to the brush and work on base coating all the other separate materials on the models. For the armor plates and shield panels, I'm going to be using this dark greenish gray by P3. Each color we choose to base coat with a brush is a commitment. So I caution you to not overcommit yourself to many base coat colors. It's only going to soak up all your time and you're not going to be able to finish. I have a couple of steps that I really try to follow for these phases. First one, I don't thin my paints. Look, I need to get all this done on 71 models, and I do not have the time to do 2 thin coats. I'm going directly out of the pot, and I'm ensuring that my paint has got good opaque coverage without being gloopy or obscuring the details. 2, I use the biggest brush I dare manage, Not only does this help me actually improve my hand-eye coordination and fine motor skills when it comes to painting, but it also makes this process much quicker. When I go over big sections of the model, I actually can do it much faster than a tiny little brush. Also, that big belly on that big brush holds a lot more paint, and more paint means less trips back to the wet palette to fill back up. 3, be smart about where you're choosing to be tidy in steps like these. I need to be tidy around the bones. They're done. I don't want to mess that up. But other areas, I don't care. If I hit some cloth or if I hit some metal bits, that's fine. I'm painting those later. So just be smart about where you're spending your time, being very precise. And finally, if I can't reach it, I'm going to skip it. Why spend time making more mistakes trying to hit some hard to reach area that you probably can't see anyway? When you're 6 feet away from these models at the table, we're gonna work on things that really draw your eye to them. And trying to get under an armpit where he's got something mashed in there, I'm not worried about. All right, it's about 11:30 on Friday night, and I'm about to turn in this armor step, base coating, all that with the brush. I definitely underplayed how long that was gonna take. I'm gonna have to come up with some ways to make up time tomorrow. It's Saturday morning, and I'm starting again with a renewed vigor and excitement to get moving. I move onto the cloth. I choose Bugman's Glow by Citadel for this color. And once I started applying this, I immediately made a second guess to myself of, was this the right choice for a cloth color? It's kind of a pinky skin tone, and I don't know if these Skeletor wannabes are really gonna be in all their glory in a color like this. But this is why we did a test model. Looking back on it, it really turned out cool. And there's some steps we're gonna take later to do so. For now, I gotta trust the process, don't overthink it, and just knock this part out. The final base color to be applied by brush is all the metallics, and I'm using Vallejo Metal Color Aluminum for this. Now ideally, this would be over a black primer. These seem to really coat well and shine well. All metallics do over black. Well, we don't have that luxury. Luckily, this paint is pretty potent and has such high pigmentation for a metallic, even being very thin, it wasn't an issue. Our next step is what I would call one of our first big secret techniques to pull off this dark, evil, gritty paint scheme. And with that, we are going to be using AK Interactive Streak and Grime. We'll hose down these entire models with this enamel wash. Now, if you've not worked with enamels before, you're probably saying, John, what the hell are you doing? You just sludged this stuff all over all the models that you just spent hours and hours painting. What are you doing? Well, we're about to see. It's all in the secret of Q-tips. You see, enamel washes are something that we're gonna let dry for a little bit of time, and then we're gonna dip our Q-tips in mineral spirits and gently go over the surface of the model, and it pulls up all that enamel wash. It's like we're using an eraser to erase the areas that we don't want the wash to exist. For me, I'm getting rid of a fair percentage of it. I want to stay in the cracks and the crevices, in the surfaces that are bottom facing. But overall, all those bright colors underneath are gonna show again. This process is easily the longest step in the entire painting weekend, but it's kind of 2 steps in one, so I justify it there, and it creates a pretty massive transformation. A couple tips that I've learned with using this product. 1, the base coat that you're putting on prior to the enamel wash, you want light. The lighter, the better. That's why we used a pretty light pink color and a pretty light bone color. I noticed that the dark gray-green armor it's hardly even noticeable that the wash is even there. So we want to start light, and this will bring in the depth of color. I have an idea of what we're going to do later with those shields and armor bits to make them stand out. For large models like the catapults, I decided the Q-tips were going to take simply too long. So I grabbed some makeup sponges and used those dabbed in a little bit of mineral spirits to pull off all that enamel wash quickly, and it worked amazing. I already keep a pack of makeup sponges in my painting area because I use it often in airbrushing. It's a great thing to clean off the tip and the needle of your airbrush safely. And so there you go. Buy some. I want the metals to look a little bit more rough than they already do. And so I'm going to use AK Interactive's Rust Streaks, also an enamel wash. Just use a brush and apply it on those. I'm going to do something slightly different though. When I remove it with the Q-tip, I'm going to use a sweeping motion perpendicular to the blade edge to show how the rust has been pulled away over many, many hacks and slashes and decapitations and mutilations. I don't know, skeletons kill people. So we officially have all our depth and darkness created in the model, and all the shadows are established. And now we need to build back up the lights. Just a little bit. Again, we're on a time constraint. A big thing for painting an army or speed painting in general is to focus your attention around the head and shoulders of your model. That's where we want the eye to be drawn. I take my base bone color and I mix it 50-50 with Pro Acryl's Ivory. I then bring out the magic mix. This medium is actually amazing for steps like this. It creates a smooth, silky consistency to your paint. It thins it down slightly without making it too watery, and it gives you a longer working time. One reason I really like it is because it allows me to layer the paint instead of worrying about more advanced techniques, and it doesn't create stark transitions between the base coat and the highlight. I hit the head, the shoulders, some parts of the bone on top of the shield, and we move on. All right, I'm calling it a night. It is a little after 11 on Saturday night. I'm feeling a lot better about today. I got a lot more done than I kind of thought I would, and we're in a spot to maybe try some extra steps or really give a little bit more attention to the details tomorrow, and hopefully we can finish this thing on time. Like I said, the shield and armor panels still look flat, and I've got a step later that I think will really do the trick, but for now I wanted to do some edge highlighting really quickly on them. I just mixed some ivory with the base tone for that armor and followed the two main factors that I use to have quick and efficient edge highlighting. First one, make sure that almost all of the paint is off the brush. Wick it off on a paper towel before you ever touch that model. If there's too much paint on your brush, it's a bad edge highlighting brush. And two, it's all about angle when doing edge highlighting, especially on very sharp surfaces like these. Don't worry about making your hand and your arm move to the right angle. Make the model move. I find it's a lot easier that my hand and wrist is in a very similar position, and I just move the model so it'll fit me like a glove. And our final highlighting step is back to our metallics. I just go back to my base tone, that aluminum color, and I try to create little scratches and notches in sections of the metal that showed that they have been used most often. Where would this metal wear most often? Obviously, where it's hacking and cleaving. So those are the areas I put the highlights back in. It's not uncommon that when you see a fully painted army on the table that you notice that there might be a lack of color depth. And I've got a really quick tip to kind of help your models look more complex in the colors there with very little time. what I do is I shoot a wash or a very thin down ink from below and at an angle at the model. I'm not trying to hit anything in particular, and it's going to be a very faint change in color, but it's going to show that there's something else there. For these models, I use GW's Carabug Crimson from the bottom left, and then I use GW's Othonian Camo Shade from the bottom right. It's about now where you may be saying, John, this army's not going to stand out from 6 feet away when I'm at the table. And you'd probably be right. It looks mean and grungy and dirty, but there's not anything that's really popping and drawing my eye. So let's fix that. What we're going to do is we're going to take a pure white, my favorite being bold titanium white, and we are going to just hit the eyeballs and all the gems along these models. You know, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have even tried to paint the eyes. 140 eyes dotting with pure white was not my brightest of ideas. Now, what we've done with that white is we've created a proper base for us to create a glow. Now, I'm going to use Golden's fluorescent green paint to create some extremely vibrant green gems and eyes for our models. I use an airbrush. I only very gently thin this paint because it's already very thin. But when you're working with very, very thin paint like this, you need to be very careful with an airbrush that you don't flood the model with too much paint. It was about now when I was doing the test model that I realized that I didn't love how the armor was looking. It didn't really pop or have anything interesting going on there, even with the edge highlights. So I thought I had two options. One, try a different color, or two, try a different secret. So here I'm busting out an oil paint, Abteilung 502's Turquoise Lights. And I'm going to create this wonderful little turquoise pin wash in various different crevices on the model. Now you're probably saying, John, why do I need to do oils for this step? Wouldn't I just use a regular acrylic paint for this? No, because capillary action. This takes me so much less time to just dab the paint into a crack and watch it spread and only hit the crack, never on the surface. This process went super, super fast and added more verdigris, a look of more aged armor that had seen centuries of war and decay. We are on the home stretch, folks. It's time to turn to the base. So for this, I've actually already have some weird colors and highlights that are on the base because of what had just hit the model naturally when I'd been painting the other pieces. I'm not going to fight that. I'm just going to tint it a little bit. I bring out two washes, one a darker green and one kind of a dirty yellow, and I just slap those on the model's base and I kind of mix them a little bit together where the colors meet. This gives me an interesting take on the model's base without entirely changing everything or taking a ton of time. And then the only additional thing I did to the bases was to do a quick dry brush highlight. I used this golden brown. I wanted to have a nice warm tone to go with the warm scheme that we are working with here without making it too bright. I don't want it to be as bright as our highlights up on the head and shoulders of the model. At this point, I look at my list of steps, and the only thing I have left to do is to black wrap. But I've got a little bit of extra time. Let's knock out one more cool little trick to really bring these guys over the bloody edge. I mix a Tamiya clear red paint with a little bit of a Vallejo black paint to really darken down the red. This Tamiya clear color is very shiny naturally, which is good for the look of slick, wet, fresh paint, but it's naturally much too bright. When I add a little black, I dull it down to look like a realistic blood for my models. I take that little bit of ripped sponge and I want that ripped edge facing out to be irregular. And then I grab a tweezers and grab the other side of the sponge with that end. I dip it in my paint and I just dab it on to create a natural splatter effect. As I rim these bases black, it's kind of the first time where I sit back in realization that I pulled it off. I've never had a painted army before, and I found that there was a smile on my face that I couldn't wipe off for a number of days. It really is an amazing feeling of satisfaction to be able to complete an army and really realize that it wasn't as massive of an undertaking as I thought it was going to be, with a little prep and a lot of commitment. No matter what your army, your game, or your models of choice, I hope that you got something out of this video, whether a tangible trick or just in theory. And I hope that it helps you get more of your models painted so you too can slay the gray. If you haven't checked out Scott the Miniature Maniac's video that he collaborated with me on, please do. You can see if he actually did complete his army in a weekend and how it turned out. Scott is a decent mini painter and a great YouTuber, but I'm sure you already know that. If you like this one, you know what to do, and we'll see you next time. Bet Scott's got like 2 horses painted by now. But Scott's spending more time making tongue slurping sounds than he is painting. Are you getting tendies for lunch? Bet Scott's clogged his airbrush like 3 times by now. Bet Scott's eyes are watering from sitting in his own fart smell for 2 straight days. I bet his army is like 7 models that cheating pikey.